Okay, so this guide is going to be a little less in-depth than a lot of the other guides I made, only because the deck I'm giving a guide on has gone through one minor change and then one like major deck-changing change. It went from one deck almost to an entirely other, where it kept like the same basic play style, which is why I think I can combine the stats, but it also has a very different like set of cards in order to do that. So the deck is Rush Hunter, Rush Warrior, not Hunter, I'm sorry. And basically, the goal of this deck is to be an anti-aggro deck using the Rush and the weapons to control the board, and eventually buff up a Frothing Berserker or a Fester Root Hulk to be your win condition, and hopefully have them be like a 10-7 or a 12-4 Frothing Berserker, and just winning the game using those minions. They're your win condition. Or getting maybe even like a buffed up minion and double rampaging, or an injured minion, like, I don't know, a Rabid Worgen. Say you got a 3-1, you rampage it, now it's a 6-4. Hitting him in the face. What can deal with a 6-4 if you're playing against a Hunter? Kill command if he has a beast out? Yeah, maybe, but you've been controlling the board with your minions. Flanking strike leaves it at 1. Hunter's Mark and Candle Shot takes 2 cards to do that. He might not have both of them. Hellfire into Warlock doesn't do it. Duskbreaker, like, the +3 health is actually insane from the Rampage. I mean, I'm getting off topic here, but there are multiple ways you can actually win this game. And the issue with the other version of the deck, which I will talk about a little bit, is its lack of card draw. Actually, I probably won't talk about the other version, because that version went, I think, 3 and 7. But when I changed the decks, it became 5 and 4. And overall, I think that the 5 and 4 version of the deck is better. And so without further ado, I will just jump right into the deck. So the overview of the deck is, again, it controls the board. And upgrades you can make to the deck are... The biggest one I can think of is probably putting in some more mechs, maybe, instead of, like... I don't know, you don't necessarily need... Actually, no, I really like the way this deck is built. You don't need the unidentified shields, though. If you want to put in 2 later game bomb cards, take out the unidentified shield. Definitely for Dr. Boom, the Hunter, the Warrior. I don't know why I keep saying Hunter. The Warrior new hero. And then you have one other card you could put in. Ooh, you could put in Hellscream, that 4/9 charge in Rage. If you have the money to do that, if you have the dust, I think both of those cards give you alternate win conditions that will honestly help you out a lot. And the fact that he gives your Max Rush mean that if you draw an Eternum Rover later in the game, it can combo pretty well with an Execute. It's a rush 1 damage to kill something. Omega Assembly could give you a lot of mechs to give rush as well and apply pressure. And I think that Dr. Boom and Hellscream would be very nice additions to this deck, taking out the unidentified shields. The unidentified shields are okay. They're fine. They usually have pretty good other abilities, and it's always mana efficient, but I don't think it's as good as some of the other alternatives that I just mentioned. Other than that, this deck functions the way it does because of the cards that are in here. And if you take a lot of the cards out, it won't function the same. And the other version of the deck, which I'm not even going to be talking about really, relied more on pirates and weapons, which wasn't as good as this one, I'm going to say, because this one has card draw, it still has some weapons, and it has buffed up minions, whereas the pirates, like Bloodsail Raider, was meant to be a buffed up minion, but it didn't really fulfill that role. The only thing I could really say might be better in this deck is taking out like a Slam for a Silence, like a Spellbreaker or an Ironbeak Owl. Because a Silence, sometimes an Execute, if they have a Death Rattle, it's not as good, but if you have a Silence, it could be good, at least in like Death Rattle Hunter, or even Death Rattle Rogue, or anything with a Death Rattle, or something that you need to silence, like Divine Shield and Taunt. Annoyatrons, if you have one of them left in your way, you could just silence it and go face, rather than have to trade 2 minions into it, because in that case, Execute doesn't help you. But anyway, this guy's going to be shorter because of the fact that I've had less data on this. So I'm not going to go into individual matchups. I'm going to go into the general matchups being aggro and control, and to some extent mid-range. And I hope that you guys aren't too upset by this, but this deck was all over the place. I tried it a little bit. I tried some games that I didn't record the data of, and the rank reset, so some of my wins are in lower ranks, like rank 8 and 7. So due to all these factors, I'm not going to try to give you a super detailed thing just in case I'm wrong, but the general information will still be right. So hopefully you guys aren't too upset by this. But generally, into control, this deck does not do super duper well into some control decks. However, it does do well into Druid, in my opinion, because of the fact that they have very limited hard removal, and your board isn't going to get too wide. So Spreading Plague won't actually hurt you that badly. The one attack taunt minions mean that you can just trade minions into it, buff up your Frothing Berserker and your Festroot Hulk, because your minions aren't going to die to one attack minions. Not only that, but it'll proc the Enrage from the Wasp. It'll allow you to get a really good Warcry, not Warcry, that is the incorrect card. I'm sorry. It'll allow you to get a really, really good Battle Rage. Because if you trade into a ton of one attack minions, all of your things will be damaged by one. Not only that, but it's a very easy proc for Rampage. And you have Rush minions too, which is why it's especially good. Because if you play a Militia Commander, which is a 5/5 for 4 with Rush, well, it's a 5/5 for 1 turn. You can definitely just kill one of the taunts immediately. And he has no way of responding to that and making more taunts. And also the other rushes make it very easy because you don't have to flood the board. And if you play something like a big taunt or a wide board of taunts, you can just trade into it with your rushes. So Druid is actually a pretty good matchup for you, in my opinion, in terms of control. As for the rest, try not to flood the board. And if you feel like a board wipe is coming, don't play the Frothing Berserker. I know it's your win condition, but like if it's turn 4 and you're playing against a mage, and you know it's a big mage, they could have Dragon's Fury. Don't play it. You could play it on turn 3 and hopefully get it buffed up to do like a pretty big push, and then hopefully they don't have Dragon's Fury. But don't play it on turn 4 right into the Dragon's Fury without buffing it up or being able to attack with it. That's just not intelligent. You could play the Festroot Hulk, maybe. It might be a little better because the odds of the thing killing it, the Dragon's Fury killing it, are not as high. But it's still not ideal. Then there is the Shadowwalk Shaman, or at least mid-range Shaman, which is another control deck that you probably won't do well against because it has cheap removal and has Hex. So, in the control Druid, you could do whatever you want. The taunts won't actually do that much damage to you. The taunts won't actually hurt you that much unless it's a big taunt Druid, in which case that'll hurt a little bit more. But if it's not Druid, you can just roam free. Into most of the other control decks being Control Warrior, Warlock, Shaman, and Mage, and even Priest, don't overcommit to the board. And if you think a removal is coming, do not play the Frothing Berserker. Actually, you can play it into Warlock and Shaman because their board wipe does not, and even Priest if they run Duskbreaker, because it won't kill the Frothing Berserker. So you can actually do a lot of damage with it. Like, they wipe your board, but you have an 11-1 on the board. And you just smack them in the face for 11 damage. Like, you could still do it, but I wouldn't recommend it because it puts you in a losing position, or a position that can be easily dealt with by killing one minion. So just don't overcommit to the board. Think about what removal they could play. And if you want to take the risk of playing the Frothing Berserker into a potential board wipe, so that way he can get buffed up and you can do a lot of damage next turn, you can do that. But if you also want to hold him in your hand, let your board get wiped and restabilize with him and maybe a minion or two, that's also fine. Into aggro decks, this deck really shines. Because the Rush allows you to trade into minions into like even Shaman and Zulok and Odd Paladin and Odd Rogue. It allows you to just trade into them. You can kill all the minions without losing too many of your own. Some have Enrage. You can Rampage on a couple minions. And overall, it is just a pretty good deck into aggro because it has a lot of ways to deal with it. It's similar to Odd Paladin and Shaman in the fact that you don't control things with spells. You control the board with your minions. And then you have a board left afterwards because you have weapons and some minions to deal with their minions. And I think that this deck does that extremely well, especially with the Rush and Charge, because some of the other decks don't necessarily have that. They need to have a pre-existing board to start controlling the board, but you could be like, oh, well, luckily I have a 3/3 Rush in my hand to deal with his 2/2 Knife Juggler. It'll live, and then I can attack with my other minions on the board to continue to apply pressure. Or something like that. Like, you have a lot of options with this deck, basically. Or you can kill a 1/3 Taunt and a Zulok, or a 2/1 with a 3/3 Rush. You can kill a 2/1 with the Wasp. Into Shaman, you can kill the Dire Mole if they're playing that. Into Rogue, you can kill a Firefly or a South Sea Deckhand if they play that immediately, and then they're going to have to trade their weapon into your minion, which means you get even more damage out of it. So into the aggro decks, this deck actually does pretty well. And since in lower ranks, people tend to play aggro more than control, I feel like this deck could perform pretty well at the lower ranks. So that's the basic overview of the deck and the guide. I hope you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed this deck quite a bit. I didn't think I would. I don't think it's amazing, but I did enjoy playing it just because I like minion-based control decks. That's why I liked Odd Paladin personally, and I liked even Shaman. And it's why I like this deck. So I hope you guys have as much of a positive experience with this deck as I did.